and welcome to College Football Now, our live broadcast every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on OrlandoSentinel.com. I'm Brant Parsons. Sitting beside me, as always, our national college writer, Matt Murschel. And you were up in Gainesville this week, and that is where we're going to start. I didn't even know where to start on this, but the amazing comeback by the Gators. 2 touchdowns in the final, 4:09, a 64-yard touchdown pass to seal it. That was freshman Antonio Callaway. Catches the ball on 4th and 14, goes all the way to the house. Just a crazy scene. And most of the fans were still there. Some had left the swamp, but just what you saw, just experiencing it and being there. What was this like, Florida football being back and just the whole electricity of it?
Well, and I want to pump the brakes a little bit on being back. I mean, I think people who watch this game would realize, Tennessee had this game through much. Again, they led at halftime. They really took advantage of Florida's lack of ability to stop the big play. We saw a lot of, Butch Jones went deep into his playbook to put up some razzle-dazzle plays. Did a lot of quarterback, the 58-yard touchdown pass. Catch by Joshua Dobbs, the quarterback, throw to the receiver, throw back at him. You look at also some other plays that they were able to take advantage of. The jump pass, a la Tim Tebow
pass
for 24 yards down the road. So Tennessee really was able to do that early on. I think also they confused Will Grier. I think they made sure that Will Grier wasn't able to kind of find guys as open as I think he had in the past. And I think the running game struggled a little bit at times. But really what helped Florida in this game, and Jones admitted this afterwards, was the 4th down conversions. Florida is one of the best teams in the country. 10 for 10 on 4th downs. They were 3 for 3 Saturday against Tennessee.
5 for 5.
Oh, 5 for 5.
5 for 5. Don't we?
So really, you look at the fact that they were able to take advantage of that. That really kind of helped keep some drives alive. And at the very end, they had the 63-yarder, which they took advantage of to make for the touchdown. So again, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a great win for Florida, but it's definitely one they needed to have if they want to continue to move forward under Jim McElwain.
So what happened in this game? This is a game, as you said, Tennessee dominating the ball at the line of scrimmage, 250 yards rushing, something to that effect. Will Grier struggled, except for on 4th down. What happened in this game for it to go from 27-14 to people leaving the stadium to doubt everywhere before that, was it 17-play drive that Will Grier led him on with 4th down conversions to just get him within the touchdown? What happened in this game? What changed? Where did you see? Where's the focus on why Florida won this game, which even Coach McElwain would say, I don't know that we deserve to win it, but he's obviously glad that they did.
Well, I think what really changed was the fact that I think Tennessee, and this is something that, again, Butch Jones talked about afterwards, Tennessee needs to learn how to finish games. They weren't able to do that in this game, so to speak. They all the points, all the they were getting up early on, all the yards they were getting up early on, were some of these big trick plays. And I think, down the road in the second half, they kind of got away from that. Also, Florida did a great job of limiting Joshua Dobbs as a passer. He was running the ball really well, but they really kept him in containment. He almost looked at times like he was afraid to make the pass. He was afraid to really do it, find guys wide open. So I give that credit to Florida secondary. They were able to shut down that part of the game. And once you made Tennessee kind of one-dimensional, I think then Florida was able to get back into this game. I also think, too, that because Tennessee used their running attack and drew out some long plays to start the third quarter, I think maybe mid-third quarter, we saw some of Florida defensive players looked a little bit tired, a little bit gassed because they've been on the field for a long time. But once they were able to take advantage of some of these situations offensively, again, I think that's why Jim McElwain went for it on 4th down a couple times. I think that kind of opened the door a little bit, and then Florida was able to get back. Then Tennessee really had no answer. Although, again, 55-yard field goal, if it goes the right way, we're talking about a different story here.
It was very close. And you talk about Dobbs, there was a point in this game, he was the leading rusher for Tennessee, the leading receiver for Tennessee, and he wasn't the leading passer for Tennessee. He was at the end of the game, and they really did hold him in check. It was the second largest comeback in Florida records history. So that goes back to 1966 in the 4th quarter. They had done, I think, 17 on Auburn back in the early 1980s. But big comeback win for the Gators. We'll have more on them later on when we make our picks for Ole Miss. Now we got to go across town, and we got to talk about UCF.
Do we have to?
We have to talk about UCF. We have to talk about the Knights. They went up to Columbia, South Carolina, and played the Gamecocks. Played them well, you could say, for a half. They actually had a lead in this game, 14-8, after a South Carolina miscue and a decent drive. The one decent drive that they had, where Bo Schneider was 5 for 5 and led them down the field, and they actually had a 14-5 lead before South Carolina hit a late field goal. Second half, everything went wrong, obviously. If you're a Knights fan, you outscored 23-0. You finished the game 230 total yards, 26 rushing yards. And if you want to know how many yards per attempt, that's 1.1 yards per rushing attempt. The long run was 7. So out of all those times they even tried running the ball, the longest run was 7. I mean, you could fall down and get 7 yards sometimes in college football. This is a real epidemic. And I guess we can. I don't know what else there is to say about the UCF problems on offense. We know what they are, but in this game, which I know you were up in Gainesville, but you were able to see some of it. This was just what we expected from UCF, except for that moment where maybe you believe we didn't think that they would do well against South Carolina, bigger, stronger, faster, whatever you will, but just more just the back-breaking stuff for UCF, struggling on offense and not making plays on defense.
Well, I think this is something that was symptomatic of what's going on with UCF's season. You know, I was at the press conference Monday with George O'Leary, and he said, listen, this is a team of 2 halves. I mean, we're a first-half team. You know, one hand, you got the first half where they've led in every
3 out of 4.
3 out of 4. They've led at halftime. You know, and then you go into the second half, and they just kind of crumble. They've only scored 10 total points in the second half of all 4 games. You know, they have 6 turnovers in those second halves. They only have 8 total turnovers as a team, so you know most of those are coming in the second half. So, as you know, Coach O'Leary said, you know, again they're trying to find ways to get back, you know, get up. He said there are a lot of young players, there are a lot of guys right now who just, you know, when a bad play happens, instead of shrugging it off and trying to get back out there and doing your assignment, you know, they kind of let it get to them and they get their head down. And he said, you know, we got to do a better job of that. He said, not just the players, but the coaches as well. They got to look in the mirror. They got to decide what do we need to do to get better. Because I think, again, they feel like there's some pieces there to do some good things. There's some talent, but they just aren't putting it all together. And I think, again, if they can get the energy up there, they're looking at this now. They get into the conference season, the American Conference, and they feel like if they can, you know, somehow turn it around, it's a 0-0 slate, and win all their conference games, they still got a shot at the conference championship. But you know, looking at this team, looking at some of the problems they have, offensive line, the running game, I think they need to get Justin Holman back. It looks like doctors cleared him, but he may be still day to day. He probably won't play against you know, Tulane this weekend. Again, you know, once they get some of these guys back, hopefully some of these things will correct themselves.
And you talk about the mistakes, and there's the mistakes like Bo Schneider throwing 2 picks in the second half. That's back-breaking stuff. But also, the first play of the game, South Carolina comes out and should have thrown an interception. You make the defender drops the ball. You make that interception, it changes the perception of the game. If South Carolina doesn't fumble that punt, UCF never gets the ball on the 1-yard line and maybe doesn't have any sort of offensive spark in this one, but you can't make the mistakes. I mean, you come in that second half and you're Bo Schneider, you have to take better care of the ball. I don't care who's the quarterback, Justin Holman, Schneider, you have to not turn the ball over. And once those happen, as you said, you could just see the air come out of this team. You could see the deflation, and then you just knew it was over. Long before it was over, it was over.
And I mean, one thing, and that's another thing that, you know, George O'Leary talked about, you know, a little bit was, you know, he wants to see some of his players really step up and make some of the plays. He talked about the receivers. You know, I know we talked about this before the season started. We knew when you lose so much talent, when you lose Brashad Perriman, you know, Rennell Hall, J.J. Ward, when you lose guys like that, you're going to have kind of a drop-off a little bit. But he felt like there's enough talent at that position that these guys can make catches, you know, have some guys miss some tackles, and, you know, maybe turn, you know, a small, you know, throw and catch to a big, you know, gainer. But that hasn't really been the case so far. So I think, again, you know, you got a lot of young players, you know, a little bit of a mix of some experience. Those guys need to teach the young guys, listen, you know what, don't get down, don't let these things happen. Come up, you know, let's play, let's keep moving forward. Again, I think this is going to be a critical weekend. This is against Tulane, because I think they're going to have to find a way to try to get a win or at least finish strong, especially a second half.
And we'll talk about that UCF Tulane game coming up across the country on Saturday. Some high hopes for those night games. You're coming off Tennessee, Florida. An hour later, you had the Texas Tech TCU finish. Just great finishes. Pac-12 had set itself up. 3 big games on prime time. They owned prime time, and then just blowout city. Arizona embarrassed by UCLA on their home field in that one. Final score 56-30. I don't think it was even that close. A score's not indicative of the game. USC blows out Arizona State 42-14, and then probably the biggest shocker, even if it doesn't have the same resonance as maybe the UCLA game, Utah goes up to Oregon. The biggest loss for the Ducks at home since 1977. That was back when I don't even know if we knew anything beyond Oregon football other than they had yellow and green and Donald Duck on their helmets. But 62-20, Utah. Makes Michigan loss look a little bit better, losing to a team like Utah. But we'll get to maybe some of the other ones. But the Utah game, they did everything right. We're talking offensively, defensively, special teams. They played about as perfect game as you could and just annihilated Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Utah team that I wouldn't be shocked to see them, ranked among the top 15 in the next couple of weeks. I mean, they're making a big push right now. They're doing things kind of the non-traditional Pac-12 way. They're more of a physical team. I think you're seeing that up front. We saw that on the defensive side of the ball. They were able to really kind of manhandle Oregon, made them look slow almost at times. I think you look at they've got a good mix of a solid quarterback in Travis Wilson. You got a good running back in Devontae Booker. Both those guys are able to working well. They're all playing well. Considering the fact that this program went through so much upheaval in the coaching staff. Kyle Willingham is there, but he had to make some changes. Guys left for other programs. He brought in 3 or 4 different assistant coaches. It's just amazing to think that this program is where they're at right now. And again, contending very much so for the Pac-12 title.
It's amazing how close or where Oregon was back in January to where they are now. And it really shows you can have a lot of parts, but it comes down to that quarterback play. And I know Vernon Adams lit up Eastern Washington and the red field and had some great numbers and potential. But you're seeing, one, the fact that he didn't get into camp until late, that he wasn't, he hadn't been in the system that long. And you're also looking at, two, maybe there are things that he does that he just doesn't do like Marcus Mariota, which is, he's a Heisman winner. That's not going to happen. Vernon Adams having trouble the moment the pocket collapses. He leaves the pocket. He's not making the right decisions on the run. He's not hitting the right guys. He's making mistakes. He ended up being benched in this game. Everybody thought Vernon Adams would come in. It would be a fix for Oregon, and it would just keep rolling, but that hasn't been the case.
No, and I think when you look at this situation, I think that's really what kind of the dangers of going after what I call the free agency, situation for a quarterback. You look at what they were able to do. Vernon Adams, he was a guy that was a graduate transfer. Comes in. He was supposed to come in and really, like you mentioned, really kind of light up this offense, step in for Marcus Mariota, and continue the tradition that we're used to seeing out of Oregon football. But it wasn't the case. Now, granted, he's been injured. He's had some problems with his finger, and that's been an issue. But I just don't think he's looked comfortable at all in this offense. I don't think he really fits in well what Mark Helfrich wants to do. And I think it's, again, like I said, it's kind of a warning. I mean, we're seeing right now Everett Golson struggling a little bit with, Florida State with the offense there as well. So it's not a given that you get these guys to transfer in a graduate situation and come in and lead your team to, a conference title or even a national championship.
We are 1 month into the season, so we're going to take a moment to pick out some superlatives so far this year, maybe some of the teams that have surprised and disappointed and such. And we'll start off with the biggest surprise team, and you have 3 listed. You put down Northwestern, Texas A&M, and Utah. And I guess you can talk about all 3 or just pick one of those. But at this point, a month into the season, who's the biggest surprise as far as a team for you?
I think the biggest surprise would be probably Texas A&M. I mean, again, a program that under Kevin Sumlin, guys really kind of turned this program around. They get to the SEC. We're seeing what they've been able to do there so far, but I didn't see them coming out and being as strong as they have been so far. Kyle Allen, the quarterback, has played really well. He's one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the SEC. John Chavis comes over from LSU, is now the new defensive coordinator, at A&M, and they've done a great job, really, probably putting together one of the best, 4 or 5 games so far when you look at their stats from the last 3 or 4 years of holding teams down. So I think together they've done, it's been impressive. You look at what the SEC West is like now. We're used to seeing Alabama, Auburn, and maybe Mississippi State, but now what you're seeing is Texas A&M, Ole Miss, at the top right now.
And I'm going to the SEC West, my surprise team so far this year, and that's Ole Miss. And you talk about a team last year that came onto the scene that was unexpected, and they were maybe expect a little bit more, but you lose a quarterback, you bring in, here's a guy coming in to transfer that does do well in Chad Kelly. They're averaging 55 points a game, almost 350 passing yards per game. Laquan Treadwell is back. He only has 1 receiving touchdown, but 300 yards, and he opens up that offense. And then you look at the defense and the Land Sharks defense of Ole Miss, and they're even with the game against Alabama, when Alabama scored a ton of points, they're still averaging 19.2 points per game allowed. And so Ole Miss, to me, is a surprise team for me because I thought they would be good, but I wasn't expecting Ole Miss to be the number 3 team in the country this year because when you have a new quarterback come in, it takes some time. And Chad Kelly, so far, has shown that maybe the past of his can't compare to what he's doing now, and you can look past what you thought you were getting from Chad Kelly, because he looks like a whole different quarterback here under Hugh Freeze.
Well, and I think if you look at Ole Miss too, I mean, one of the things you got to remember is, we were only 2 years removed from them having a top 5 recruiting class. Remember that everyone was all, well, how did this happen? How did Hugh Freeze do this? Must be something going on. And in that class, he had the number 1 receiver. You talk about Treadway. They had the number 1 defensive player, Robert Ndici, and then they also had one of the top offensive linemen. So I think what you're having is when you have these strong recruiting classes, it's going to take a year or two. They're not going to come right in right away and get this done. We saw a little bit of it last year. We saw them kind of make the big push, and then they kind of trailed off towards the end. But now I think what you're seeing is these guys are really playing. They're being healthy. Again, I don't necessarily know if this is the team that's going to turn around and win the SEC, but I think they're making a good, strong case for it right now.
Biggest disappointment team so far, and you've talked about both of your picks on this, Oregon and UCF. Hard to tell which one would even be maybe more of a disappointment in that one. You had Oregon very high coming into the year. You had them number 2 in the country coming into the year. Which of those two would you say is the bigger disappointment?
Honestly, probably at this point would be, it's like you said, it's throw it up. I would almost have to say probably UCF. In a way, and I know that's kind of it's easy to pick on a team that's winless, but again, I think all of us figured that maybe 2-2 after the first 4 games was going to be good for UCF. You're coming off a really good season last year, 9-win season, back-to-back American Conference Championship titles. To come out and be 0-4, to look literally as bad as they've looked, to not being able to run the football, to not, granted, again, injuries, and you lose a guy like Joey Grant on the offensive line, you lose Justin Holman for a while, William Stanbeck goes away because of was kicked off the team because, with problems. Again, all these things can contribute to this, but just to look at this team and to see the offense struggle, to see the defense struggle, to see them kind of not really being able to finish games, that's a very un-George O'Leary-like situation. So, to me, that's probably the biggest surprise going forward.
My biggest disappointment is not that hard, and we weren't as bullish on them as others, but I'm going with the Auburn Tigers. There are people that had Auburn in the playoff this year. We had them top 25, and I think we still had them too high. And it's multifaceted, the issues here. Obviously, we know the story of Jeremy Johnson. I guess he's not the second coming of Cam Newton. 6 interceptions in 3 games. They bring in Sean White against Mississippi State. He doesn't throw a touchdown pass, also throws a pick. The offense is only averaging 22 points a game, 344 yards. These are low numbers in college football. We know they nearly lost to Jacksonville State. They seemed to quit against LSU at times, letting Leonard Fournette run all over them, and only scored 9 points against Mississippi State. If you want one positive for Auburn, it's Peyton Barber, who's like somewhat bright on offense, but this is a down the line kind of thing for Auburn. We're talking bad tackling, bad quarterbacking, bad running game, losing the battle at the line of scrimmage. And granted, we didn't have them a top 10 team. We didn't have them as a playoff team, but we didn't think they'd be this bad.
Do you hear that, Brant? do you hear that? Yeah, that's the apology I'm waiting for Auburn fans who attacked me for not having them.
You're getting a lot of those apologies?
Yeah, you're hearing them right now, obviously. So anyways,
maybe they lost your email address.
Yeah, I want those apologies, please. Listen, I think obviously, anytime you bring in a new defensive coordinator, I still think Will Muschamp is a good defensive coordinator. I think it's going to take him time. Again, you can't make these changes right off the bat. He's done a great job recruiting. He's trying to bring in some talent. I think we knew what this defense was. We saw last year they had their struggles. I think coming in this year, I think, again, they're going to get some guys back, hopefully healthy. They'll recruit the next year or two and get that defense back as well. I also think the Jeremy Johnson case, I think there's a case where a guy comes in and everyone assumes he's going to fit right in with this offense that Gus Malzahn has been running, and it wasn't the case at all. I think he's actually almost a detriment in a way sometimes with this offense. So I think sometimes the quarterback does make the offense. If you can't really run it the way you want to run it, I think we saw what Nick Marshall was able to do. And again, Jeremy Johnson's no Nick Marshall. He is who he is. So I think all these things have kind of contributed to what's going on, and we're seeing Auburn where that. I still believe they're going to be bowl eligible at some, this year. I just don't necessarily see them as a top 25.
Bowl eligible, wow. They're not in my bowl projections. Wow. I look at them, I can't see them winning 4 or 5 at this point. All right, so we'll have to see what happens there. They're not in the latest bowl projections. You can check those out at OrlandoSentinel.com. The best team through a month. We've talked a little bit about your best pick, but we'll go with the Utes. A team that you got nasty email from fans last year for. We're doing a theme here.
Yeah.
But just a really strong start to the season. And it'd be hard to argue they haven't had the best start.
No, really, it had been. You look at the Pac-12 outside the SEC. I think the Pac-12, could arguably be the best conference in college football right now. When you look from top to bottom, I think you look at the talent level. We talked about UCLA. We talked about USC. We thought Oregon maybe would be there. Stanford's playing well now after their early loss. Even Cal, Cal is undefeated, really putting themselves in there as well. So I think Utah is showing where they need to be right now. This is a program that in the last, ever since Urban Meyer got there, a couple, decade or so ago, this program has always been on the right track, always finds a way to kind of restock, rebuild, move forward. I think we're seeing that now this year. I think they have the pieces to go far. The question is, can they survive the Pac-12? Because again, like the SEC and like we see with a lot of these teams, eventually the wear and tear gets to you and you're going to end up slipping up in a game where maybe you think you're going to probably win and you don't.
My best team so far might play your best team in the Pac-12 title game, and I'm going with UCLA. They win the games like you need to. They had a come-from-behind win against BYU, and then, of course, the blowout of Arizona. And people talk about Josh Rosen. He's a freshman quarterback, a true freshman quarterback has come in. He's had 2 great games, and he's had 2 cover your eyes, please don't make me watch those highlights again games. But the constant through all that is a strong offensive line and a running game with Paul Perkins, who gets the job done. They're not afraid to use him. And Josh Rosen has shown he can step up. He stepped up big against Arizona. But that, to me, is why UCLA, at this point in the year, I have them as my best team because they've won those big tests. And it was a red out in Tucson. It was the ESPN game day. This is a good Rich Rodriguez team. But UCLA went in there and just manhandled them to where this game was over in the second quarter. Second quarter, I stopped checking this game out because you knew it was done, and that's what UCLA has done. And as we've talked about in the Pac-12, it's a vicious conference with a lot of teams that can beat, but they're setting themselves up now. Arizona State doesn't look as strong as we thought, so it could come down to playing USC at the end. I think UCLA is going to be the team in the Pac-12 title game against Utah, but that's why I picked them as my best team.
Well, I think obviously, I think if Jim Mora deserves to be the early coach of the year candidate. You take a guy who's a true freshman quarterback, you put him in the situation he's been in, and he's shown, like you mentioned, how good he's been able to be. He is a freshman. That's why we've seen some of the mistakes he has. Look at the injuries they have. They lost Miles Jack last week. They've had defensive injuries up and down. They're still able to find ways to win games, and I think that's the important thing. That's how you find success. That's how you keep moving forward with it. I think, as you mentioned, there are going to be some big challenges ahead. I think obviously playing Utah is going to be a big game. I think that USC game, the battle for LA, is going to be another big one too as well. So I think this team moving forward is going to be probably the best next to Utah, the 2 best teams coming out of that conference.
Right now, there are 29 teams in Division 1A football of college football that are undefeated, either 3-0 and 4-0. 29 teams. Out of those 29 teams, we asked each other who was the worst, and we came up with the same one. And it's a team that beat Southern Illinois 48-47, beat FIU, slipped past Western Kentucky, and knocked off Wake Forest. The Indiana Hoosiers are 4-0. And the reason I even talking about Indiana, it's a great segue to talk about their game this weekend against another 4-0 team, Ohio State, who is somewhat to straighten things out with Cardell Jones coming up. But Indiana now hosts Ohio State this weekend with a chance to be 5-0. But in reality, we're just doing this as an excuse to talk about the #1 Buckeyes.
Well, but I've been impressed by Kevin Wilson. Again, you're a program like IU. You haven't been to a bowl game in a while. You want to continue to establish yourself as somewhat relevant in the Big Ten. Now that you're seeing programs like Ohio State, Michigan State finding their ways into the national landscape. So, kudos to Kevin Wilson. Again, a program right now that has produced some of the best running backs in the last couple of years. The Howard kid this year is the
UAB transfer.
UAB transfer. He's one of the guys that's leading the country. With rushing yards as well. Last year they had Tevin Coleman. A guy who really put out for 2,000 yards rushing. So this program is finding ways to do things. That being said, you're going into an Ohio State game where you would think this would be a blowout by the Buckeyes. I think maybe I'm interested to see, can Urban Meyer get this team up again? It seems like week in and week out, it's getting this team up. It's getting this team ready to go. That was the challenge coming into the season. You've won the title now. Now, how do you keep moving forward? How do you keep them? How do you keep your players inspired? I think obviously Cardell Jones is going to be the guy at quarterback. They feel at this moment he's doing things right. I think last week's game, I think we saw them go away less from the read option, using more of his arm strength downfield, finding guys open, Jalen Marshall down the field. And I think Ezekiel Elliott, I've been saying this from the start, just keep feeding Zeke the ball. Keep feeding Zeke the ball. Because if you feed Zeke the ball, eventually he's going to find the holes. He's going to help wear out some defenses. And that's what this team does. I think defensively, Ohio State is pretty good. But as I've said time and time again the last couple of weeks, none of the top 10 teams right now have looked impressive. No one looks like the number one team in the country right now. They're all just kind of playing as if they're just kind of waiting to see what happens. It's time now for Ohio State to step up.
And a good test for Ohio State. Jordan Howard, as you mentioned, 675 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns so far this year for Indiana. And as they said we didn't beg him to come here, but we're certainly glad he did. Of course, he played at UAB before that program was shut down temporarily. Our last thing in our month season look, we're going to pick our playoff teams. And if you could put a crystal ball in front of you, who would you put in the four teams in the college football playoff right now?
Well, I would have Ohio State at this point. I know we talked about them and they've been looked at as impressive. I would put Ohio State in there. I would put Baylor at this point, but I would put the little asterisk next to Baylor because I'm not really sure yet of this Baylor team. They've looked, they've put up a lot of points, but they've played nobody. They have the weakest strength of schedule in the whole country right now. So again, they're going to be undefeated. I think there's going to be a big push to try to get a Big 12 team in because of what happened last year. I think if you're looking at another team, maybe Ole Miss, out of the SEC at this point, unless somehow they lose a game to Florida this weekend or something like that. And then maybe, you would think Michigan State, but I think the problem with that is they're going to face Ohio State and Michigan State are going to face each other down the road. So, maybe UCLA, maybe Utah. So again, I think you got the Pac-12, you got someone from the SEC, the Big 10, Big 12. I don't see an ACC team getting into the college football playoff.
I don't see an ACC team. I don't see a Big 12 team getting in. I have Ohio State and UCLA joined by Notre Dame, who I think can lose a game and still get in because they're Notre Dame, and the SEC champ. And I just wrote SEC champ down because I don't know who it's going to be. I'm not convinced it's going to be Ole Miss. I still think Alabama gets back into this mix this year, and they end up being the SEC champ. I haven't buried them yet, but whoever wins the SEC is going to be in the playoff. And even with 3 losses, you would think they would find a way. But whoever wins the SEC is going to have a loss or two, but that'll be good enough to jump ACC team and possibly a TCU or Baylor team who won't have a strength of schedule conference title game to put them in.
Well, I will argue this, though, and this is something to consider, is there's only one team out of the East that's ranked in the SEC, and that's Georgia. Let's say Georgia loses this weekend to Alabama, for instance. They fall out of the top 10, top 12. If somehow if there's no ranked team coming out of the East,
like the Gators,
or the Gators coming out, going into the SEC championship game, whoever comes out of that West, I don't think that championship game is going to help them enough maybe to get a boost. So as much as I'm with you, I believe there's going to be an SEC team there as well. I think this is going to be, we're going to start seeing this in the next couple of years where some of these conferences, it's really going to be interesting to see how the playoff committee looks at them later on in the year and how they consider them if they're strong enough to get into the playoff.
Before we get to the picks portion of our show, this is the time where we look at Matt Murschel's Heisman Pick of the Week.
Woo-hoo.
It's a big thing. I mean, this is a big award. And we want to talk about Leonard Fournette again. And really, what can we say this week that we didn't say about Leonard Fournette last week? So instead, I want to talk about something related to Leonard Fournette, which has been getting some buzz among the talking heads out there. And Leonard Fournette can't go to the NFL after this year because of the rules and such. He's only 2 years removed from high school. He needs another year before he can declare for the NFL draft. If Leonard Fournette finishes the year like he has, wins a Heisman Trophy, maybe takes home a national title along the way with LSU, should he come back next year, or should he take a year off and not risk getting hurt, not risk wear and tear, which is also something that happens to running backs, especially one where he's carrying the ball a ton as he has so far this year. Does he risk even playing next year?
Well, and listen, I mean, this was just kind of thrown out there by people in the media about this idea of, we saw this maybe a couple of years ago. Jadeveon Clowney said maybe I should sit out a year, should have sat out a year, build up my health, keep working out, and then come back, come into the NFL draft and be ready to go, And as we saw, Clowney was hurt most of his junior year before he was able to go on the NFL, and he was hurt for his first rookie season in the NFL as well. I don't think that Leonard Fournette is even thinking about this. He tweeted out that he's sticking with his teammates. The school has been adamant that this isn't going to happen. It's an interesting concept. It's an interesting idea of, do you sit out and rest your body as a running back? Because really the shelf life of a running back is one of the shortest when it comes to football. I mean, you look at the NFL, running backs don't last more than 5 or 6 years because of the wear and tear on the knees. We talked about the load he's taking. But I look at this LSU team, and I don't see Leonard Fournette carrying the ball 350 times this year. We saw that a little bit last year, that we saw some of the guys were able to do that who led the country in rushing. Melvin Gordon, for instance, rushed for over 350 carries. I don't see that happening with Leonard Fournette. I think Leonard Fournette wants to play. I think if you're a player, you want to play. You want to get out there. You want to have the experience. You want to be and see what happens and continue to help be with your teammates. Stepping aside, I think what's going to happen is NFL GMs and scouts will think, well, this kid only cares about money. He only cares about the contract. He doesn't care about his teammates. Doesn't care about winning. And that's why he's sitting out, and which is kind of, in a sense, what you're doing. So I don't think this is going to be an issue. I don't think Leonard Fournette, even if he wins the Heisman and LSU wins a national championship, I don't think Leonard Fournette sits out. I think he comes right back because he wants to try to do it again and show everyone he's the top running back in the country. But it's an interesting debate because at some point, I think maybe in the next 4 or 5 years, I think I wouldn't be shocked to see a player do this. Sit out and decide, I'm just going to go hit the gym. I'm going to get my personal trainer. I'm going to get myself in super shape. I'm going to do that. And I may lose a couple spots or maybe lose the first round, get out of the first round, but I'm going to get drafted somewhere and I'm going to be able to prove I'm a good player.
Derrick Rose would like Leonard Fournette to think about the money he can make in 2 years. He wants him looking ahead. That's the Derrick Rose plan is.
Well, what also, too, is, and I think people throw these as examples, but it's just two different situations. Look at a guy, Marcus Lattimore, for South Carolina. He came back from an injury, blew out his knee, came back. Everyone thought he was going to at least go to the NFL try. He blew out his knee again, when his junior year in school. So he wasn't able to have that NFL dream. So, but I think any player, any kid, anyone will tell you they want to be on the field, they want to play. They want to be with their teammates. So I don't think this is an issue. I think maybe, 4 or 5 years down the road, we could see this happen. But for now, I think you should stay in school.
All right. And that ends our Leonard Fournette portion of the program. It's time to look
at Fournette
Watch 2015. It's time to look across the state for state picks, and we're starting Thursday night up in Cincinnati. The Miami Hurricanes head up to play the Bearcats. The Hurricanes won last year. In fact, the only time Cincinnati has ever won a meeting between these two teams was back in 1947, the first time that they ever met. Hunter Keel, the heralded quarterback for Cincinnati, won't be playing in this game. Redshirt freshman Hayden Moore will be in, and all he did his last time out was set a school record with 557 yards passing. Brad Kaya is not bad. He's thrown a touchdown in 16 straight games. He's thrown one in every game that he has played. This game will be in the air, but the key to this one for Miami is going to be dealing with that high-tempo offense that Cincinnati will play. Miami is a better team than Cincinnati, I think, talent-wise across the board. But the catch for them, and it's the same issue they had with FAU for a half, is dealing with the higher tempo, the higher pace, and the rhythm that Cincinnati gets in. And obviously under Moore, you lose a little without Keel, but not too much for how he played against Memphis. He did throw a pick or two in that game. But to me, that's what I'm looking at. I'm picking Miami, but they need to be careful because Cincinnati can cause some havoc with that offense.
Well, I'm going to take Miami in this game as well. I mean, I think, obviously Moore surprised Memphis a little bit. Again, their defense was probably, really kind of predicated around Gunnar Keel coming out. And when Gunnar Keel goes down, I think Moore comes in. He's got the hot hand. He's able to take advantage of that. I don't think that, again, they put up a lot of yards, a lot of points. I watched that game last week. I think Miami's defense is better than Memphis's defense. I think they'll do a good job of trying to slow them down. They now have film of Moore. They can study that. They can go out there and take advantage of some of his weaknesses. I think the thing that Miami wants to avoid is they don't want to get into a track meet. They don't want to have to be running up and down the field trying to outscore Cincinnati rather than kind of containing them as a defensive unit. So I like Miami in this game. I think defensively they'll try to shut them down. And this is one of those games that really, if you're Al Golden, you want to get this win. You want to have this win. You want to start out 4-0. You've got you still got that fan base, part of the fan base who wants to see you go, flying the banners over the stadiums. You got to go. So these are the games you got to win. You got to go and get through the non-conference schedule and then move forward to the ACC.
Yeah, an ESPN game on Thursday night. We're heading out to New Orleans for the next one, UCF at Tulane. You mentioned that it's all starts fresh when you enter conference play. So I guess we can say UCF is 0-0 on the year, but there's just a bunch of O's when you're talking about this UCF team. The worst offense in Division 1A, 244 yards a game. The second worst offense is 292 yards a game. That's how bad UCF's offense has been through 4 games. Tulane, they've got a good running back duo out there, Dautrell Hilliard and Sherman Brady. They've combined for 341 all-purpose yards last week against Maine. And I'm going to throw a shout-out to Nico Marley, their linebacker, son of Rohan Marley, Miami Palmetto grad, and a track and field teammate of me in high school. Before he went on to star in Miami and start a coffee company and become world famous on his own. But Nico Marley, I mentioned
the show. But
I've got the show. So who's really having a better life?
Who's got a better life?
Rowan Marley.
So.
But bringing up Nico Marley, not just to bring him up, he's leading the team in tackles, 23 solo tackles, and really the heartbeat of that defense. I haven't made a pick yet in this one. I'm just like, can I just do like Vegas and do a pick 'em? I don't know who to pick in UCF Tulane. I'll let you pick first, and I'll figure it out while you're talking.
Well, I'm going to go Tulane. I mean, I as much as I think UCF is trying to get back on the right track, I think you mentioned their deficiencies in the offense. I think defensively they've got to be a little bit more aggressive. They got to force turnovers. They still haven't been able to get that push from their front defensive, the front line, to really kind of create havoc, to get the sacks and everything. And I think, again, once Justin Holman gets back, I think maybe he'll be back next week, who knows. I think that helps give the offense a little bit of a boost. They'll have Dontravius Wilson back from the running back situation. I think that'll help a little bit, But again, the line isn't causing those holes. These guys are breaking tackles. They're forced to kind of do it on their own. So I think Tulane wins. If this game was at UCF, maybe I would go to UCF, but I'm taking Tulane.
I'm going to pick UCF. They got to win sometime this year,
That's right?
They can't go 0-12.
They need to win. As much as this is a game they really need to win. Because if they lose this game, I think the concern George O'Leary and his coaching staff would have is you start losing some of these young players. They'll look at this and say, well, this is a rebuilding year, and that means, But again, I think these guys got to step up and be able to do things.
I mean, if you look at that schedule for UCF, there's not many games that you can say that's even a W chance at this point for how they're playing.
I mean, you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 at this point.
This is one of them. I'm taking UCF. I've been wrong before. I might be wrong again. Florida State is back at it this weekend. They travel up to Wake Forest. Last 3 times they've played Wake Forest, they've given up 6 total points to the Demon Deacons. But this is a new Wake Forest team, an improved Wake Forest team, if you will, at least offensively. They're going to have a passing offense. They've been able to move the ball. They 25th in the country in passing offense. They have a top 20 defense so far this season. Florida State, they are number 11 in the country, but they hopefully spent some time during their off week fixing some of the offensive problems. They won't have Mario Pender in this game, so it's going to be all on Dalvin Cook and on Everett Golson. It's ACC play. It's a little bit tougher. I don't see them winning this 53-6 or whatever the average would be over the past 3 games. But this is a better Wake Forest team than Florida State has played the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Dave Clawson, who came over from Bowling Green's done a great job with this program so far. It was going to be a struggle. I mean, you saw that last year with what they did. This year, they're a little bit better. I like Florida State in this game, but I think this is going to be. I think what fans are going to have to get used to is more of a grind them out type Florida State team. Where they're really. This isn't going to be blowing out teams, by 30 or 40 points. This is going to be one of those games where every game is going to be close in this, early on, especially. They got to get Dalvin Cook established. That offensive line really's got to do a better job of protecting Everett Golson. And I think Golson, honestly, if I'm Jimbo Fisher, listen, you've got to open up this offense a little bit. You got to let Golson take some shots downfield. You've got talented wide receivers. If you could take those shots downfield, eventually what happens is it opens up the defense, opens the middle of the defense, and allows the running game to really take advantage of it. We saw Cook do that early on. I think if they give Golson some opportunities, he's going to throw a pick. He's going to make a turnover at some point. Just limit those, keep those really less, and don't turn the ball over in crucial situations.
You got to let them have a chance to turn it over.
Yes.
And that's what hasn't happened with Florida State. The way that they've done this under Jimbo Fisher has not put him in the line of fire, and they need to do that. They're going to have to do that. Maybe it's this week. Maybe he's picked up a little bit more of the offense even over these 2 weeks. Again, we talk about Brant. Everett Golson has not been in this offense that long.
No.
And in
you got
a couple of weeks of preseason, you can only pick up so much of the offense. when you have a bye week like this, you
and
have
it's
a little
not
bit
even
of time.
that so much as I just think it's developing a relationship with his receivers. I mean, and his offensive linemen. He's got to be in these meetings. He's got to be at school. You know, a lot of these guys have been at school a couple of years, 2 or 3 years together. They room together. They've done all this together. You know, this situation is Golson just has to really kind of bond with his teammates, build that rapport with his wide receivers. We saw Jameis Winston do it last year with his guys, Rashad Green, you know, Nick O'Leary, those guys. And I think that's what Golson has to do is really kind of develop that relationship with his receivers.
I'm taking Florida State in this one. The other game, the game in the state this weekend, lots of games across the country. It's one of the big ones. Number 3, Ole Miss travels to Gainesville. Number 25, Florida. The last time they met, Tim Tebow had a famous speech. Ole Miss won that game 31-30. Florida went on to win the national title. Ole Miss has started 4-0 in consecutive years for the first time since 1961, 1962. They have forced 10 turnovers. They have 7 interceptions. But on the other side, Florida Gators have won games. Just win, baby, right? That's what we tell them. Kelvin Taylor, though, had 100-plus yards against Tennessee over the weekend. He is the first Gator since Tim Tebow to rush for a touchdown in 4 straight games, the first running back for a Gator to run in 4 straight games for a touchdown since 2004. So Calvin Taylor got the message from Jim McElwain and had the touchdown in that game. Florida did knock off Tennessee in exciting fashion. But this one, this is the test. Where are we now as a Florida Gator team when Ole Miss comes to town? A good Ole Miss team comes to town.
Yeah, and I think obviously this is probably the best defense that Florida has faced so far. You know, they're going to really test Will Grier. I think Will Grier has yet to impress me enough to believe that he's an elite SEC quarterback. He's made good throws, and I think he's improved. The offense has improved as a whole, you know, under Jim McElwain. But I think there's still some situations where you'd like to see him be a little crisper. You know, this isn't Eastern Michigan. This isn't, New Mexico State. This is a team right now that's gonna test you. You know, Ole Miss, 7 plays of 50 or more yards so far this season. They love to go deep. They love to take advantage of that situation. So I think that's something, again, we saw Florida struggle with against Tennessee. They've got to limit that. They've got to make sure they don't let, Ole Miss receivers get ahead of them, make those plays happen as well. I like Ole Miss in this game. I mean, I just think they have some of the top players at some of the different positions, and I don't think Florida has that kind of talent just yet. So I like Ole Miss in this one.
I picked Kentucky to beat Florida. I was wrong. I reluctantly picked Florida to beat Tennessee, but I got that right. I'm not drinking the Gator Kool-Aid. I'm drinking the Gatorade. It is all about the Gators this weekend. They're going to knock off Ole Miss. You need some Gatorade?
No.
It is all about the Florida Gators. It is a return to Gator prominence. Tim Tebow, this one's for you. Gators beat Ole Miss.
Well, that will be interesting to see happen.
Called it right here. Right here. Not the Kool-Aid. Drinking the Gatorade.
I hope you got that spit take ready to go, because that's what's going to happen this weekend. So.
We'll see what happens. And you sip of my my Gatorade. All right, national picks before we get to them. Players to watch this weekend. And you picked a guy that I almost had put on mine, a big game taking place in the SEC, Grayson Lambert. For all of the headlines Nick Chubb gets for the University of Georgia, Lambert has been probably the bright spot for this year, because you know what you're getting out of Nick Chubb, but what he's been able to do at quarterback has to have Georgia fans feeling confident heading into this game against Alabama.
You talk about what a different team makes for this kid. I mean, he goes over from Virginia, where he was kind of battling for the starting quarterback position, struggling there, comes over to Georgia, starts working under Mark Richt and Brian Schottenheimer, the new offensive coordinator. Boom, this kid has been near perfect the last 2 games. I think he's only thrown 2 completions. He's going to get the big test this weekend, obviously, because he's going to be taking on an Alabama team that defensively is probably one of the better defenses they've seen. I think he can rise to the challenge. Having guys like Nick Chubb in the backfield able to kind of take some pressure off you, allow you maybe to not feel that you have to throw the ball 40, 50, 60 times and win the game yourself. I think he realizes he's got a good offensive line. Jeremy Pruitt, the defensive coordinator for Georgia, has done a good job as well of keeping games close. So again, I mean, I think that Grayson Lambert done a great job so far. It'd be interesting to see if Georgia beats Alabama this weekend. I think you'll see his stock rise a lot more.
And I'm going to another game that we're going to pick, and it's going to be from the West Virginia-Oklahoma game. And I'm going with Skyler Howard, the quarterback for West Virginia. He's got 9 touchdowns, only 1 pick so far this year, 916 passing yards. And his counterpart in the backfield, Wendell Smallwood, who's rushed for 331 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. And West Virginia, the schedule has It's been soft. When Maryland is your big win so far, but their defense has been strong. But it also comes from not making mistakes from the quarterback position. Howard's been able to do that so far this year. He's leading a dynamic, growing offense in West Virginia. This is a quietly good West Virginia team. And again, they've done it against Cupcakes, so maybe that's why they're not getting the credit for it. But I think he's key this weekend against Oklahoma, a team I am now thinking is the Big 12 champ. This is a chance for Howard and that West Virginia offense to really kind of say, hey, you know what, we deserve to be in the discussion, which I think they do.
Well, and you look at what Dana Holgorsen, the West Virginia coach, has been able to do. He really does a great job of working with quarterbacks, getting him to develop. You saw what he did with Clint Trickett, who transferred up there, was able to really kind of turn him into an elite quarterback, so to speak, before injuries really kind of took their toll and he had to retire. But, I mean, again, he's done a great job with Howard. The offense has been well. They get their biggest test this weekend.
Yeah, and we're going to start with that with our national picks. Number 23 travels to Oklahoma, number 15 in the country. This is a noon kick on Saturday on Fox Sports 1. And West Virginia talked a little bit about that schedule, but they do come in with a defense, the best defensive scoring defense, with just 7.7 points per game. They're number 2 in passing efficiency defense. They're number 6 in first down defense, 17 in pass defense. This is a team that has done what you're supposed to do on the defensive side, but the offense obviously doing well too, as we talked about under Skylar Howard. And of course, the last time out, Baker Mayfield, 572 yards of total offense against Tulsa for Oklahoma. The walk-on quarterback has the most total offense yards by any FBS player so far this year. That is where this game is going to be won. I'm watching the West Virginia quarterback, but it's going to come down to, can that West Virginia defense that has done well against inferior opponents stand up against Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield?
I think you look at this team, you look at the Big 12 in general. I mean, I don't necessarily see this conference as a highly rated defensive conference, so to speak. I know West Virginia's done a pretty good job. I think Lincoln Riley, the new Oklahoma offensive coordinator, has done an amazing job turning around this offense. Took a guy like Baker Mayfield, really kind of resurrected his career. Now he's looking like a guy who could possibly be a first-round draft pick at some point. I like Oklahoma in this game. I think Oklahoma wins because it's at Oklahoma. I also think that Baker Mayfield's going to put up some big numbers. I think this game's going to be high scoring. I mean, it seems to be week in and week out the Big 12. That's all it is. But I like Oklahoma to win this game.
I'm going with Oklahoma, and I come from a West Virginia family. My dad's a fan. My sister's husband went there, so I know about West Virginia. So they're not under the radar for me, and I think they'll come outside of the radar for this one. But I still think Oklahoma is just a tad better. I still have them picked to win the Big 12, so I had to go with the Sooners on that one. Mississippi State, number 21 in the country, heads to number 14, Texas A&M. They won this game last year between the two teams, 48-31. Dak Prescott, he's thrown 191 straight passes without an interception. I mean, that is ball control from the quarterback. It's a school record. It's the longest active streak. He's thrown a touchdown pass in 18 straight games. Mississippi State, had they beat LSU in a close game early in the year, would be having a lot more talk about right now. But that's all being swallowed up by Ole Miss and LSU. But this is a good Mississippi State team. This is a team only giving up 14.8 points per game against an A&M team. And this was a stat that I thought was interesting. They have not had a 2-0 conference start since 1997-98. That is a long time, and that's not just SEC. That's anywhere. So A&M, even these teams that have been pretty good, still couldn't win those first two conference games. They'll get a chance at home against Mississippi State in this one.
Yeah, and again, we talked a little bit about Kyle Allen, the Texas A&M quarterback, his play. You look at what he's been able to do. I think the really key to this game goes back to the defense. You look at what I mentioned, John Chavis taking over with the Aggies defense. I think they've done a better job. Myles Garrett up front, for them has been unbelievable. I think he leads the SEC in sacks. He's going to be a force as well. I like Texas A&M in this game. I think A&M pulls out the win. Again, and I warn people, I think A&M is one of those teams where we talk about starts that are really hot, 4-5. They did this last year. They won a bunch of games early on, but then kind of struggled towards the second half of the season. But I think right now they've got the pieces in place, as long as Kyle Allen doesn't turn the ball over, to really kind of disrupt Dak Prescott and take advantage of that and win this game.
I mean, Kyle Allen's played well. Christian Kirk has played very well for A&M. I can't buy into this. I saw them almost lose to Arkansas. If Arkansas doesn't implode including one play where the defensive player didn't even know the ball was in the air. They may not even win that game against Arkansas. I am a believer more so in Dak Prescott and Mississippi State. It's a road game. It'll be tough in front of the 12th man, but I'm taking Mississippi State in this one. We talked a little bit about our next game. Number 13 Alabama visits number 8 Georgia, the first meeting since the 2012 SEC title game. A fact that has been spread around, and it's right. Since 2008, Alabama has only played 3 games that didn't have national title implications. And whether they were in it or playing a part in it, if they lose this game to Georgia, they're going to have a whole bunch of games the rest of the year that don't have national title implications, because this would really put them in a hole with a tough schedule still remaining. Is Georgia, under Mark Richt, with Nick Chubb and everything else going on, is this the year that Georgia finally takes that leap? And doing that this week with a big win against Alabama go far way to make that happen? No,
actually not. I think Alabama wins this game. I'm going to go with Nick Saban. I'm going to go with Jake Coker, Derrick Henry. I think one of the things that we talked about is because Alabama hasn't been that underdog, because they really haven't had that. It's interesting to see how this team kind of reacts. I think there's a growing chip on the shoulder of the Crimson Tide players. I think they've only got one loss. They know that, listen, it's too early to be counted out for the college football playoff. So what they're saying to themselves is, okay, you know what, we're going to go in there with this attitude that we're going to do what it takes to get the job done. I think Jake Coker, as long as he doesn't turn the ball over, and as long as they're able to get Derrick Henry involved in the offense early on, I think this team can win this game. Now, I think it's also going to be a high-scoring game as well. I don't think this is going to be a really close game. We saw what happened with the Ole Miss game. I think Georgia can score some points, but I like Alabama to win this one.
I keep saying I think Alabama's going to win the SEC. I can't look at this game and not pick Georgia. And this game is going to be won in the trenches. Georgia is averaging 257 yards per game rushing. Alabama's only given up 57. Alabama's problem against Ole Miss wasn't stopping the run. It was stopping the pass. So this is going to come down to that line play. I'm going to take Georgia in this game. I'm going to go against everything I said 20 minutes earlier. Can I do that?
And the only thing I'll say to end this is that the idea is that there's always one game on Georgia's schedule that everyone thinks they should win that they end up losing. So.
Yeah, that could be Kentucky. They're going to beat Alabama this weekend. Okay. Lose to Kentucky later on. Kentucky, right. Good football team. And finally, Notre Dame visits Clemson, number 6 Fighting Irish, number 12 Tigers. Clemson has quietly won 11 straight home games. They've won 6 straight, but Notre Dame comes into this one rolling. Number 12 in the country in rushing offense, almost 300 yards per game, 285 yards per game. CJ Procease, he wasn't even supposed to be the guy, and he has 600 yards, the most in school history, through 4 games. I'm a believer in this Notre Dame team, and they keep getting injured, and they keep bouncing back up, and the defense is strong, and they can run the ball. I'm a believer. Notre Dame is going to go into Death Valley, and they're going to beat Clemson, and that is why I have them eventually in my college football playoff.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to actually pick Clemson in this game. I think what Brent Venables has done as defensive coordinator at Clemson has been great. The defense has done a marvelous job so far. Everyone wants to talk about Deshaun Watson and what he's able to do as the quarterback of this team and the offense they've been able to do. And they have done really well with the offense, and they're putting up some good points. But, again, I think it's been the defense that's really helped them out. We saw that against Louisville a couple weeks ago when Watson struggled and the offense struggled. The defense stepped up. Death Valley is a tough place to play and a tough place to win. Notre Dame goes on the road a lot. They play a lot of different venues. I think this is going to be a tough game. I think it's going to be a close game. I like Clemson to win this game.
I got Notre Dame. And before I go, since you were feeding me that haterade earlier, I just want to get a little more Gatorade in here. Just remind everybody.
Wait, let me. Is that bitter flavor?
That's orange.
Okay. Well, I thought that was
it's
bitter
orange
flavor,
color.
So
because it's Gator orange.
We can't show product placement.
Yeah, because they're not paying for this product placement.
So.
Everybody talks about drinking a Kool-Aid. I'm drinking a Gator. I just want to remind everyone one more time. Gator's going to knock off Ole Miss, and he's going to come in wearing a Gator shirt on next Wednesday or something like that.
Will not happen.
We didn't make a bet. We should have done that beforehand. But that's it for this week. Next week we can figure out how right I was and how wrong Matt was. But until then, check out all of our coverage on college football all week long at OrlandoSentinel.com, and we'll be back live again next Wednesday, 2 p.m., assuming we survived the weekend and this Gatorade settles well with me. But until then, for Matt Murschel, I'm Brant Parsons. Enjoy the college football weekend. We'll talk to you again next week on OrlandoSentinel.com.